Hello, and welcome to Way Too Serious, the show where we get way too serious and spend way too much time talking about things that in the grand scheme of life just don't really matter. I'm Kurtis. With me is my brother Tony. Tony, how's it going?
Not too bad. What's up with you?
I'm ready to talk about a few movies here, and these movies a lot of people take seriously. This isn't going to be a nerd fest like last time. These are the AFI top 5 movies that we're going to be talking about today. This is from the 2007 list. They originally did this top 100 list in 98 for the 10-year anniversary, which was 2007 instead of 2008 for some reason. They redid it, and we're doing that list. We're doing the top 5 from that list. We're going to talk about those movies. And we'll get into that, but first we're going to lay it out, and each week we're going to lay it out for you and just tell you a little bit about what we think about this before we get into it, kind of let you know what our biases and preconceived notions are. And for a list like this, we really got to lay out what the AFI thinks too. So this is their criteria. This is from Wikipedia. These are feature-length American films of critical recognition that also won major awards. Also considered as popularity over time, historical significance, and cultural impact. So that's where they're coming from. Where I'm coming from is that for the most part, these are old movies. I'm not usually a fan of really old movies. It's not that some aren't good, and we're going to talk about some here. Some that are good and some that maybe aren't as good to me. But I usually, it's hard for me to go back and watch these sometimes. And, well, that's really what I got. So, Tony, what do you think before we get into it?
I guess my original thought when you presented this was what we were going to be doing was, okay, that's cool. I should be watching some of those anyways. I do these 2 podcasts now where I talk about movies, so it kind of makes sense to go take a look at what the American Film Institute says is the top 5 of all time according to them. And I forget how many people vote on this. I think it's 500 people they sent this out to, and so I thought it would be neat to take a look at these movies. I did, like, one of the first things I looked at was to see, like, the average year, like, and it was, like, 1961. So I was born in 1985. Kurtis, if I recall correctly, you were born in 1979. So right. The majority of these movies are much, much older than both of us. So I also thought it would be kind of neat for, I say younger, so 2 younger guys to...
One of them was in my lifetime. About before I was even 1.
And none of them were in mine. So I thought it would be neat to for someone our age to take a look at these and talk about them. And then also, I'd never seen Casablanca, and my dad has talked about it for as long as I can remember. So
he was just here, and he says it's the greatest movie of all time. And we'll talk about it when we get it. I'd never seen it either. I'd also never seen Singing in the Rain. I had seen the other 3, but we'll talk about that as we come up on them. But let's hold up for a minute. Do our hold up segment each week. We're going to talk about something, hopefully on topic, that relevant, and see if it holds up. And as we discussed last week, that can mean a lot of different things. And this one for sure is going to be tough because it's from 1939, so it's really been a long time. Talking about The Wizard of Oz. It was directed by Victor Fleming from 1939, like I said. And this movie, I don't know if you're old enough to remember, Tony, but there was a time when I was little when this was a big deal that it came on TV once a year. Do you remember that? Or you were like around the time, I think by the time you kind of got old enough to remember, like, video stores were a thing. But when I was little, especially like until I got to maybe 7, 8, or 9, we didn't even have a video store where we grew up. So this was a big deal. Like, it came on Sunday nights, and nobody went to church that night, and it was a huge deal when it came on. And I told my wife that, and she didn't believe me. She didn't think that was a real thing. And then once we were watching the Oscars, and Whoopi Goldberg was talking about how she remembered it, and then I found like a couple other people on YouTube talking about it. And it even has its own Wikipedia page. The Wizard of Oz on television has its own separate Wikipedia page. That's how, like, important this was on TV for a long time, like doing the research, like even back into the 50s, it was a big deal. And it's such the antithesis of today, where my son can literally watch this movie anytime he wants. We have it, a digital copy. We can download it to our devices. He can watch it anytime he wants, as many times as he wants. Oh, and he can do that with 10,000 other movies. So this movie just kind of has a special place for me. If it holds up, this movie was never meant to have been watched in HD on a big screen TV. I mean, you could always tell like the backgrounds were painted, but it's very obvious the backgrounds are painted. The costumes, you could really see where they applied the makeup, like the Tin Man's underwear in HD. It's very clear, like he's just wearing like a pair of silver sprayed underwear. So that part of it, also the performances, like it's very goofy. The acting style is goofy, but that's how they did it back then. But I did watch this with my son. I think he had saw it maybe when he was real little. This is kind of the first time he was old enough to really know what was going on. And he loved it. He really thought it was fun. He liked the songs. He liked the flying monkeys. He really had a good time watching it. And I think he'll probably show it to his kids too. I think this is a movie that, for whatever reason, stands the test of time, and that we're going to talk about a lot of classic movies today, a lot of movies that have ingrained themselves in American culture. I hadn't seen two of them. Kids today probably haven't seen any of them. Some of them they shouldn't see until they're older. And I think this is the one movie out of the six we're going to be talking about that pretty much everyone's going to see. We're going to show our kids. They're going to show their kids. And I don't know why that is. I don't know, because it's a goofy movie. It's a silly movie. It makes the plot is ridiculous. But for whatever reason, it just has some like childlike thing that people like. And for that reason, as crazy as it sounds, because I didn't say Iron Man held up last time, I am going to say this movie holds up. Sorry, I went very long-winded there.
No, that's not like you at all. I don't remember them showing it on TV. I remember I read an article about it years ago about how it was such a big deal, and we used to have to go to Granny and Paul's house to watch it because it was on CBS, and that was we only got 2.5 channels at our house, if you remember back then. And they got 4, right?
CBS was the half channel, and they got 4.5. So they got full CBS. So we would have to go to their house to watch it sometimes. Yeah, and even they stayed home from church to watch it.
That's surprising. Yeah, I don't really remember that. Like I said, I read an article about it, and it was like talked about the lengths and how they could get this many commercial breaks in, and it really was a big deal. But I just remember Mama Joyce, our grandparents on the other side, our grandma on the other side, had a copy of it, and that's where I saw it. And when I heard the rumor about the Tin Man, or the guy hanging himself in the background, basically, like that's where we went to go check it out.
In HD, you can clearly see it's a bird, though.
Well, the HD thing was, like Kurtis said, the backgrounds looked terrible in HD. Like they couldn't have looked any faker.
The makeup looks really bad too.
It to me, this was a really hard call to say whether it holds up or not, because if this was released today, it would just be laughed out of the place, and. But it is really good. I really did enjoy watching it. And Judy Garland was like just such a superstar. Like, extremely talented. Carried this movie, no doubt. Very impressed with her. But I'm gonna say that it doesn't hold up. I don't know that Kurtis's kid, even though he's pretty evil, I don't know that he'll be showing this to anyone. I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
I mean, that's probably true. Like I said, the reason we've watched it is because I grew up with it, and obviously he's going to be able to watch it anytime he wants and get sick of it. So you might have a point, but until generations stop showing the next generation this movie, because like I said, that's not really the case for any other movie we're going to talk about. Dad's favorite movie is Casablanca. He never made us watch it, but we always watched Wizard of Oz. So I don't know. We'll see in like 30 years who's right, if I'm still around.
directed by Gene Kelly and Stanley Donen. This was one. Kurtis said he had seen 2 of. How many movies did you say you had seen out of the 5? You'd seen 3 of them?
3.
Okay.
I hadn't seen this one before.
I'd only seen 1 of them, and I'd seen it several times, and I definitely had never seen this one. This movie is really strange, and I think this is what we're going to get into a lot in this is, how is this one of the 5 best movies ever made? Like, was it terrible? No, it wasn't terrible to me. But it wasn't. I mean, I've seen far, far, far greater movies, and I think maybe part of it is kind of like what Kurtis was saying, and obviously that's a huge effect here, is the lasting impression it had on people, and it. I think
I don't remember anyone ever talking about this movie.
Okay, yeah, and still don't.
Of all the movies on the list and The Wizard of Oz, this is the one that I maybe heard the name, but until first time I saw this list, I'd never even really heard of it.
Yeah, and the reason I think it worked is, okay, so I want to refer back to Iron Man 2 for something. I went to the opening of Iron Man 2, and there's a part where Scarlett Johansson's character does a head scissors takeover to a guy, and people popped. They thought it was awesome. They were like, oh my God, that was so cool. In the theater, these guys popped. But as a professional wrestling fan, I used to see guys do that live every Monday night. I still see them do it live most Monday nights. So once you've seen somebody do something live on a regular basis, live is basically what I'm saying is live is more impressive than filmed because you have multiple takes. So I think today when we have like America's Best Dance Crew, America's Got Talent, and you can see all these amazing dance acts do it in one take live, I think something like this just really doesn't work anymore.
I take all those dance and singing shows away. It is ridiculous that this is in the top 5. Hey, look, I'm not saying that this is a bad movie. And if you like singing and dancing, there's plenty of it here, and it's good. It's Gene Kelly can dance. Gene Kelly can sing. There were some interesting numbers here. Not taking anything away from that. This movie was an hour and 45-minute excuse for Gene Kelly to sing and dance. And then they kind of just shoehorned a plot in at the end. Like, the whole plot of the movie is that the whole talking picture thing comes in, and that's going to disrupt what they're doing, and they got to go back. Doesn't it seem like they almost just kind of snuck that in at the end? It's almost like a subplot, but it's really the plot of the movie. But it just seems like it's on the back end because it's just one big excuse for Gene Kelly to sing and dance. And, hey, he's great at it, but doesn't make a top 5 movie of all time. I wouldn't believe if Gene Kelly's grandkids or great-grandkids told me they thought this was a top 5 movie of all time, I wouldn't believe them. I don't know who's in the AFI. I assume it's a lot of old white people who've been in the entertainment business a long time. I think maybe there's some, because it is maybe kind of a parody of old-time Hollywood and they feel sentimental about it. I don't know. The singing and dancing thing, the fact that you could see that today, take this movie back 20 years before we had all these competition shows. I'd be like, oh wow, I was impressed watching it. So it wasn't even a matter of being impressed. I thought what Gene Kelly and the other guy, I thought this dancing they were doing was amazing to me. Hey, to them. It didn't make a great movie. I just videotape yourself singing and dancing, cut it down to 35 minutes, and there you go. You don't need to make an hour and 45-minute movie out of this. Absolutely ridiculous that this is in the top 5 movies of all time. Insane.
Again, I didn't mind that story being shoehorned in there like you're talking about. I actually kind of thought that was an interesting take on, audio dubbing and stuff like that. And
oh yeah, it was. But it was just kind of shoehorned in.
But
so
it definitely wasn't
some reason for them to sing and dance. Which again, that's fine. I'm not saying this is a bad movie. It's not. I'm not saying you shouldn't watch it. You should.
But it's not one of the 5 best.
No,
it's crazy.
It's not one of the 500 best.
I agree. Yeah, exactly.
All the other movies we're going to talk about, you could make a case for, I think, maybe. I wouldn't agree. This one, again, Gene Kelly's grandson told me he thought this was top 5. You're lying to me. There's no way you believe that.
So out of the 5 we're going to talk about, excluding The Wizard of Oz, the top five out of those five, this one is the worst. You think?
Yeah, it's not even a movie. It's not even a movie. It's not a film. Like, if you go by what their criteria is, I mean, it does meet them all, but it's still not a movie. It's an hour and 45-minute excuse for Gene Kelly to sing and dance. That's all it is.
All right. I mean, again, to me, it works. It just isn't. I mean,
It works. Yeah. As Gene Kelly is a great dancer, a fine singer.
What I expected,
guy and yeah, there had some good-looking women in it too. It was like the stuff is fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. It's just the audacity to say that this is a top 5 movie of all time makes me sound like I'm hating it. I'm not. I'm glad I watched it. I might watch it again sometime. I might tell someone else to watch it. It's not even a top 500 movie. Yeah,
and here's my point with this top 500 or top 100 list. When you've reached out to 500 people that you think are knowledgeable enough in the industry to cast these votes, I expect that those 5 movies will be universal. Like, if you were to set somebody down that had never seen a movie and say, these are the 5 movies you should see first. And I just don't feel like that's what we have here.
Totally agree. It boggles my mind. But so we're gonna move on. You got anything else on that one?
I think I said everything I had to say because I didn't hate it, but it's not top 5.
Agreed. So now we're moving on to Raging Bull. This is the newest movie of the ones we're gonna talk about. It's from 1980, and it's from Martin Scorsese. This is the biggest move from the 98 list. This was number 24 in that list, and it moved all the way up to number 4 10 years later. And I should have said this during the Lay It Out segment, but I'm a huge Martin Scorsese fan. Big fan. I'd never really even seen many of his movies until like 5 years ago, and I went on a kick and got them all on Netflix, and like now he's like my favorite director of all time, maybe. And this is a good movie. I don't even think it's one of my top 5 Scorsese movies. And I saw this like 5 years ago when I went on that kick, and that was the first time I had seen it, and I thought it was really good. I liked it a lot. Still like it a lot. Still think it's great. Has a case for being on this list. I can see why a lot of people like it. My problems with it is that while it's great performances, it's great direction, a lot of good things about the movie. I just don't like the look of it. The black and white is unnecessary for that time, and the only reason they really did it is because they said they wanted to try and separate themselves from Rocky. They were worried people would think it was just a Rocky ripoff. And on top of that, it's just, you watch Scorsese today, and he has just these big shots and these impressive camera movements, and there's like none of that in this movie. It's all just very static, small, almost like it looks like something from the 1960s. And maybe that's what they were going for. Maybe that's what he was going for with the black and white and everything. And then, hey, that's when it was set, right? In the 50s, I believe.
Yeah, and it was a completely different day and age of making films. I mean, and that's why this list is kind of hard to believe, I think, is because in this time period, because this list was, you could vote on you pretty much could vote on any American film with the criteria Kurtis listed that had came out prior to 1 January 2007. And again, I think this movie actually has a case to be on this list. It is a good movie. Joe Pesci is absolutely amazing in this movie. Super interesting, fun to watch. But again, I don't know that it's top 5. I haven't seen all.
Also, I mean, De Niro's a great actor, but I always kind of think of I can separate him from being Robert De Niro in this movie. He's so good in it. So it's one of his better performances, of which he's given many. There's plenty of things to like about this movie. My only main gripe is the look, and maybe that's the look they were going for, but I didn't really care for it. Since I'm such a big fan of Scorsese, and I've seen what he's capable of from just a look perspective, a cinematography perspective, this just seems, it's a great movie. Everyone should watch it. It's fantastic, but it's not one of my favorite movies he's done.
Yeah, I would say it's not even my favorite boxing movie, and I hate boxing, but I do think they've made some great boxing movies over the years, and I think that Rocky is actually better than this. But again, Joe Pesci made this movie for me, and if I watched it again, he would be the main reason why. I thought he just was amazing in this. Their relationship was, I don't know, super fun to watch and watch it develop throughout the movie. And I'd never seen this, so I really did enjoy watching this one.
I did like this movie had one of the best montages I've ever seen, which is that montage where it actually goes to color, but it's like the scratchy, kind of old home movies look. And then and that's of him like with his family and growing up, and they intercut that with the black and white shots of his fights. And you've actually like seen that parodied a few times. I remember it from the Simpsons boxing episode. They did a parody of it, but it really is super well done. It's one of the best montages I've ever seen, and it really sticks out in the movie because the way it switches back and forth. But well done, and the whole movie's well done. It's just not one of my favorite Scorsese movies. It wouldn't be in my top 5, but it definitely has a case for it, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting that the oldest movie we watched was in color, and the newest movie we watched was in black and white.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Okay.
All right, so it's time for Dad's favorite movie. This one fell from number 2 to number 3 since the list changed. It's Casablanca from 1942, directed by Michael Kurtz. And, I told Dad I just thought this was a pretty okay movie, and he got mad at me. I said one of the things I was talking to him about was, I mean, I know my history. I'm not a huge history buff, but I know my history. But it seemed like kind of you had to and they gave you the backstory of why everyone was trying to get there, to get out of that area because the war was coming. But it was real confusing about who was in charge. Like the Germans were there and they just kind of showed up, but there was that French guy and he was really in charge, but he was doing whatever the Germans wanted. And then you had it was really confused. There was talk of battalions and all this other stuff. That stuff just confused me, and it seemed like they just kind of expected you to know that because you were born in 1946 or whatever.
Yeah, it definitely didn't hold up in that regard. One of the, as Curtis said and I've said, my dad has talked about this my entire life, so I was excited to watch it. But I have to say, this is one of the worst things I've ever seen. It just did. There's a relationship in it that isn't a real relationship. It's not based off of anything. They tell you straight up in dialogue, I don't really know why I love you, but I love you. And then there's like all this bullcrap going on, and it just isn't a real relationship, so I could not care about it. It honestly was to the point where when I was done with it, I thought that it was being satirical, and I just didn't get the reference. Like I texted my dad, and I was like, what do you see in this movie? And he was like, I just think it says that, in life you'll just do anything for love. And I'm like, I just didn't see that at all. And
I don't pick up on that. He told me the reason we didn't like it is because we're the most selfish generation, and we don't get sacrifice and all that stuff, which he's a baby boomer, so that's kind of ironic. But yeah, I don't hate it. I didn't hate it. I thought it was an okay movie. I don't think it holds up to today. I think it was too long. And I mean, part of that is, I'm the first one to be the old geezer that tells these young kids that their music stinks and things were better when I'm a kid. And there's some of that in this thing too. Today we're not used to these long, drawn out scenes because movies move at a little bit faster pace. And it's hard for me to go back and watch stuff like this. I get a little bored. That's just my attention span this generation, and it gets worse every generation.
See, I don't care about that. I think if you tell a good story and have good characters, that pacing can come and go. Pacing can really make or break a movie. I get what you're saying, but if the characters had been the least bit relatable, if this relationship had any resemblance of anything that mattered to anyone, and they could explain it, which they just didn't. And that's not me being greedy, like you want to know every back point of Guardians of the Galaxy. It's I just want to understand.
Let that go. I kind of agree with you. I thought the acting was good, but I didn't feel like the connections were there, and I thought it was more just the script. It didn't really explain, like you said, why they felt this way or why they were doing it, and it makes Humphrey Bogart's character to kind of be out for himself, and then all of a sudden he's this woman shows up, and they have flashbacks to where they met, but like you said, it doesn't explain why they care about each other, what they like about each other, other than he's a man and she's a woman.
Right.
So when the whole thing breaks down, and the part that Dad loves so much that he does all this stuff for her, it really doesn't. It's almost like he's just doing it because that's some guys just do that for chicks, whether the chicks like them or not. They're just suckers for women, and that's what it seems like. It doesn't seem like he's doing it for love. It just seems like he's doing it because a woman wanted him to.
Yeah, again, this was by far, would not be on my top 1,000 movies. Just not impressed, not into it. Again, I think you should know, if you watched Epic Movie, you would realize that was a parody for sure. And that's how I felt after seeing this. I just don't get what just happened to me.
I wouldn't go that far, but I get what you're saying. I even somewhat agree, but I don't think it's bad, and I can understand why people like it, especially older people. I can understand why someone would have it on this list if it's a movie that was one of the first movies they saw. But show me someone who's under 40 or even 45 who has this in their top 5, and I'll call them a liar.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so now we're moving on to my favorite of the group, which is 1972, Francis Ford Coppola, The Godfather. I had actually not seen this movie in a long time, and that's a real shame. And the reason is, and it goes for a lot of movies, is, and I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here. Surprise, surprise. There's a lot of movies, even if they're good, they just seem like work. And if you give me a 2.5 hour superhero movie or action movie, I can watch that 3, 4, 5 times if it's good, because there's going to be some laughs, there's going to be some stuff, there's just going to be some fun in it. And as great as this movie is, and it is fantastic, and I'm really PO'd that I haven't watched it in so long, there's not a lot of fun in it. And when you talk about a movie that's almost 3 hours long and there's no fun in it, it's really hard to say I'm going to sit down and watch that. And that's why I haven't watched this in forever. And it really is a shame, because this movie is fantastic. Everyone's motivations are explained. The cast is unbelievable. It's really weird to see how young some of these people are. They're all, except for Brando, still alive today, and they're all really old. And you see them here, and they're just so young. It's really weird now. But this has one of the greatest casts of all time if you go by what all those people have done over their careers, and they're all great in it. The story is great. The performances are, again, fantastic. This is a great movie. I gotta watch this more often. I wish it wasn't 3 hours, but it pretty much has to be.
The 3 hour thing is where the breaking point for me was, because this movie has a lot going on, and this is hands down the best acted movie we're reviewing tonight, I think.
By far.
And there's so much going on that I've only seen this movie one time, and I feel like just watching it one time, you couldn't possibly process everything that's going on. I feel like there's a lot of stuff I didn't pick up on that on repeat viewings I would like it more and more. But when it's 3 hours long and not super fun, kind of like Kurtis's wife, I think that makes for a difficult following. But this movie has no problem with that. This movie has a huge following. It's one of those movies where if you said, oh, I don't like The Godfather, somebody would just instantly probably stop listening to your opinions on movies.
Yeah, it is 3 hours, and it's almost entirely necessary. You don't ever really feel like there's something in there just for padding. The only part of this movie I don't really like is the part where he goes to Sicily or Italy. I forget where he goes, but there's a part in the middle of the movie where after he, does. Oh, and by the way, that scene, I knew exactly what was going to happen in that scene, but that scene where he's in the restaurant and he goes and looks for that gun, even though I knew what was going to happen, I was still like heart racing in that scene. It's such an amazing scene. But after he does that, he has to go to Italy to kind of lay low. And up until that point, you really see his motivation, and this is Al Pacino's character, Michael Corleone, how he goes from this guy with no interest in the family business to becoming the family head. You really see how he gets in there. And that's one reason this movie is so long, because people don't just make a transition like that in an hour and a half. But the part where he went to Italy was just real weird, and it didn't really seem to fit with that. He met some girl once and then married her, and then she got killed, and that part of it made sense because that kind of drove him further into the life of crime, but he just forgot all about Diane Keaton, and that part is weird to me. It just seems out of place from the rest of the movie. But everything else in this movie totally makes sense. People are doing what people in those situations would do if they were those types of people. There's not stuff just happening because the plot says it has to happen. And that's one thing I really love in movies, is when people are behaving like they would behave and not just doing things because the script says they have to. And this movie kills that.
Yep. And I think Sonny Corleone, James Caan's character, is the greatest example of that. He, to me, in this movie, is amazing, and amongst all these great actors, like Kurtis said, that have went on to do all these great things, his performance is just absolutely amazing in this, I thought.
I will say this was, I watched this with my wife. She had never seen it before, and somehow during the movie she discovered IMDb trivia. So the whole movie, she's like, "Hey, did you know that that's a prosthetic child that he's wearing? Like they made a mouthpiece specifically for Marlon Brando, and they stuck it in his mouth." And then we get like the scene where like the guy's practicing what he's gonna say to the Godfather, to Marlon Brando, and then he goes in there and he screws it up. She's like, "Hey, he really screwed that up," and they liked it so much they kept it in, and they went back and put in that other scene where he's practicing it, so it would again, see, because they even when someone made a mistake, they went back and put in a scene that explained it. So yeah, she was doing that the whole movie, just telling me this trivia the whole movie. So I just like kind of grabbed the remote and was like, she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm trying to turn the DVD commentary off here. It's
Pop up video.
But fantastic movie. I don't know if it's in my top 5. If not, it's very close. It definitely should be on there. I have no problem with it there. By far the best movie of this bunch.
Well, I think we should move on to what I think is the best movie of this bunch.
Okay. Citizen Kane, 1941, Orson Welles. Number 1 in 1998. Held on to the number 1 spot. I know you told me you watch this movie every year, which I did not know. I saw it once when I was like 21, so a very long time ago, and I hated it. It was so boring, and I couldn't stand it, and I never wanted to watch it again. I rewatched it for this, and it wasn't that bad. I liked it a lot more. It's very well acted, especially for the time. The things they were doing with the camera were revolutionary. I get all that. They did a lot of little things I liked, because the movie jumps around a lot. It was very cool how
Orson Welles
always had like a mustache, so you knew when it went back to that's the time period it was. Or, okay, he has the mustache and a little less hair. So even though it's jumping around from these different narrators who are telling their story to this reporter, you always know in the movie where it is just from like the way the characters look. And I thought that was really cool. I don't know that I've ever really seen something like that in a movie before. I'm sure I have, but
and he's 25 years old, Orson Welles is, and he's playing this guy throughout his adulthood, and he really does an amazing job of separating and looking these different ages. And that
I really thought that and it probably helped that it's in black and white and really old, but even with the HD, they haven't really improved on like makeup too much from them. I really like some of the really old, when they showed them really old, it looked kind of goofy, like they just melted their faces. But the makeup and the way they changed these characters, like it looked really good. It didn't look crap like stuff today does when they age characters with makeup, either younger or older.
Yeah, and he was able to go from this really handsome young man to this kind of not so handsome older man. And he even like his hairline like went from like a normal looking hairline to like receding. I don't know. Super impressed with all the makeup and visual work there. But I also thought his acting was amazing. I love the character. I love his drive. I love the progression they show as he bounces back and forth. And I know it's not Orson Welles, but like you see him as a kid too, and you see this light in his eyes, and it's I don't know. I feel like you get this great look back at this person, and I don't really know that I've ever seen a movie that captured someone's entire life like that.
I don't want to get into too many other movies, but I don't think. I agree with most of what you're saying. I don't like it as much as you do. I think it's very good. I was very surprised that I didn't like it the first time I saw it. I was young and stupid, I guess. It wouldn't be in my top 5. I don't think it's the top 5 movie of all time. If it was in the top 100, I could see that maybe. Probably wouldn't be in mine. But it is very well done, especially when you consider it was made in 1941. Interesting characters, like you said, great performances, and just some really cool stuff that if you do know about film, this is what everyone who does film thinks the greatest. This is Roger Ebert's favorite movie of all time. A lot of old people, it's no surprise it's number 1, and until a lot of these old people at the AFI die, it'll be number 1 every year. And maybe even after that. Hey, Tony likes it, and he's even younger than I am, so...
Yeah, I think it's like top 20 for me. And, I just kind of, the first time I saw this, I didn't even really know who Orson Welles was. Zac Efron hadn't played him in a movie yet, so he wasn't really on my radar. But I just knew him as the guy that sold peas on The Critic. I just knew him as a cartoon character, And
Pinky and the Brain.
Was he on there as well?
The Brain is that's Orson Welles' voice.
Oh, really?
The guy who does Orson Welles in The Critic, I think it's okay. Maurice LaMarche, who's a very famous voice. He does the exact same voice for The Brain. So it's just his Orson Welles impression.
Well, it's really well done. I've always liked The Brain.
But yeah, that's kind of where I first Rosebud Frozen Peas.
Yeah.
I the same thing. Like The Critic, I think, was the first exposure I had to Orson Welles. Of course, he was in the last thing he ever did. You know what that was? I think it was the last thing he ever did.
What's that?
He was in Transformers the movie, the old, not the Michael Bay films, the old cartoon movies. He was the main bad guy, Unicron or whatever. You remember that movie?
Let's kick some butt. Yeah, I remember Andy saying that line and Dad making fun of him for it or whatever, but that's all I really remember. I haven't really seen that movie.
Well, it was like, you remember there was like a big planet transformer?
No.
Okay, well there was, and that was Orson Welles. I'm pretty sure it was either the last thing he ever did or it was the last thing that ever came out that he did.
Michael Bay connected to that film?
No.
Oh, okay. Probably wasn't very good then.
I've got it on VHS right here.
Always at an arm length. I like that about you, Kurtis.
No, it's with my movies here.
Oh.
Gene and I are watching the old Transformer cartoons, but that no one cares about that. So, anything else about Citizen Kane?
Yeah, I think I do think that it will stay amongst the top of this list longer than Singing in the Rain.
God, I hope so. So just to talk about all these movies, with the kind of the exception of Raging Bull, and even all these movies have really, if you've watched The Simpsons or Family Guy or old Bugs Bunny cartoons, you've seen these scenes and these songs and these things before 100 times before, and you never even realize it. It's had, even though I didn't care for Casablanca, there's 5 or 6 lines from that movie that everyone knows, whether they've seen that movie before, play it again, here's looking at you, kid, all that. All these movies had a real profound impact on the country and pop culture, even years after they've come out and years after most people stopped watching them, which I think is One reason they're probably so far up, again, that's maybe not so much the case for Raging Bull, but that's a fairly new movie. And even, like I said, even that movie, The Simpsons did it too, so.
Well, again, there's movies on this list, or there's a movie on this list that's 98 years old. Like, surely, like, and it's number 49 on the list. I've never seen it. I'm curious to see it.
What movie is that?
It's called Intolerance. It's from 1916.
So they used to have Birth of a Nation on there.
Yeah.
You know what Birth of a Nation is, right?
Right, it's the Ku Klux Klan movie.
And they dropped that one. Intolerance was what the guy made after that to show that he wasn't a racist.
Oh, okay.
And I've actually seen part of it before. It was on Turner Classic Movies. I couldn't make it all the way through. I'm kind of stealing your point here, so I'm gonna let you go on it. But just to say that like we haven't gotten better at movies and that all this old stuff you're gonna say it, so I'm gonna let you say it. But I totally agree.
Yeah, it's just a little crazy to believe that. And okay, the way the voting system worked, like we said a couple times, they sent this out to like 500 people in the industry, and they provided 400 movies, and then you could also submit up to 5 write-ins. And I looked through the list of 400 movies they provided, and I thought it was kind of interesting. Like, Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery is on there, but Star Wars Return of the Jedi is not. Like, it's not even on the list of 400 options.
The other 2 Star Wars are, though, right?
The other 2 are on there,
the list,
and then
right?
And what?
They're on the list. They made the top. Both made the
Empire
top.
didn't. Just A New Hope.
Empire didn't make it?
Which is crazy, because you could argue 6 is better than 5 or 5 is better than 6, but I don't think anyone's arguing that 4 is better than 5 or 6, right?
Usually, I think that's not. I would kind of agree with you, but the consensus is that 4 and 5 are better and 6 isn't as good.
Oh, wow. Okay.
6 actually, I think, has the lowest rating, has an even lower rating on Rotten Tomatoes than 3.
What?
Yeah, people didn't like it because of the Ewoks.
What?
Do the research.
Okay.
People do not like Return of the Jedi.
All right. Maybe we'll have a Star Wars episode someday, but
I'm sure we will. But we're getting off topic with Star Wars, just like we did last time. So,
but again, I mean, like, nothing against Mike Myers and Austin Powers, but really, that's on your list that you're sending out. And again, to only allow 5 write-ins is kind of silly to me too. Like, I don't know, it's kind of, I think, swaying the vote a little too much.
Yeah, it should have been like 20.
Yeah,
but you also understand there's like 10 million movies. Like, I'm sure some of the people that wrote it in they would be writing in these like Korean films that.
Well, that goes against the rules. The rules are clearly, on the website you can print out.
Some of the movies break the rules. They're not really. They may be star Americans or they're in English, but they're either British films or.
But they're released by American production companies. Okay. That was the caveat there. Or they won.
I just think of that scene from The Critic where Jay wants to do his favorite films, and his boss says, "It's not going to be a bunch of snobby foreign films, is it?" And he takes the list and he rips it down, and he hands him what's only one name, and he says, "Citizen who?"
Well, there's, I'm almost 30 years old. There's 14 of the actual 100 movies were released in my lifetime, and a lot of them are very good watches. And again, this only went through 2006, but only one of these movies falls in 2000s, and that's Fellowship of the Ring. So I think what Kurtis kind of mentioned about a lot of people need to die off, and the list will get more current. But, to me, this list just, from watching the first 5, I just don't really give it as much credibility as I did going into this.
It's hard when you have Singing. I think if they just took Singing in the Rain off and replaced it with any other movie on the list, it would increase the credibility at least 10 times. The fact that is on there, it's crazy to me. Crazy. Just insane.
Yeah, and there's even some interesting stuff from our day and age. Number 89, The Sixth Sense. Like, I love The Sixth Sense, one of my best going movie experiences of my lifetime. But it's a one-time watch, so I don't think that.
I've seen it twice and the second time I was like, why did I watch this again?
Right, exactly.
I'm never gonna watch it. I've never watched it since. I haven't watched that movie in like 12, 13 years.
Right, and again, amazing experience, but it's only a one-time watch. Once you know the hook, it just doesn't work the same. Maybe you watch it a second time to get every little detail that you didn't pick up on the first time, but at most a two-time watch.
That goes to why I have a hard time giving a movie five out of 5 the first time I see it. I think it's almost impossible for me to like a movie that much. Like, rewatchability to me is really what gets a 4, which is a very, very good movie, up to a 5, and you just can't really get that on your first watch. And you see a movie like The Sixth Sense, and you're like, wow, that was really good, and you watch it again, and it's just like, eh.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had that happen in a lot of movies. So I'll watch a movie and say that was good, but I can't say you're one of my favorite, one of my top 5, one of my top 10 until I've seen you 30 times and I want to watch you again. But that's maybe not 100% hard, fast rule, but it's pretty close.
And then at 99, you have Toy Story, which I think is a really good movie, but I don't know that it belongs on there. I mean, it was kind of revolutionary. Number 76, Forrest Gump. I think that should be higher. That is one of my top 5 movies.
We'll be talking about that in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. And 94, Pulp Fiction. I love Pulp Fiction. I think it probably belongs at on the list, but I think Reservoir Dogs should be higher. So
I think Pulp Fiction, and I'm sure maybe we'll do a Tarantino sometime. I'm sure we will.
Hopefully.
But so we don't have to get into it too much. But I just think Pulp Fiction took what was already great about Reservoir Dogs and stepped it up a notch. So I got that movie would be closer to my top 5 than some of these other ones. But it's not even my favorite Tarantino movie. But maybe we'll get into that another time.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, again, the only thing I have to say is just, look, I get it. I have old man syndrome. I don't listen to any music that was made from a band that didn't release their first album prior to 1996 because it's all garbage. I don't want to hear it. But so I kind of get where people are coming from. That all these new movies suck and it was better when we were. But I just don't think that's the case. I mean, I'd like TV. Take TV for instance. TV is way better now than it ever was. Like, you go back and watch stuff that was on primetime network TV, stuff I liked, and it's just ridiculous compared to today. So TV's gotten better. You could make the case that movies have gotten worse recently, especially now that we're into the digital age and stuff. One thing that's really hurt movies is everything has to make a ton of money now because prior to the whole digital thing and everyone stealing stuff is you can make almost any movie you want and it would make money from either rentals or DVD sales. So you can make almost any movie you want if you could convince studios to make it for you. And when digital came along, people started stealing stuff. You got to get people in the theaters to see it, and you got to give them a reason to buy the DVD or buy the digital copy. And that's why everything's got to be comic book and hey, we like those movies. We talk about those movies. Those are good movies, but you got to be fresh and stuff like that, and that just doesn't happen anymore. So I think you make a case that in the last 10 or 15 years, maybe movies have gone down a hill a little bit, especially the big movies that we all talk about and all see. There's still a lot of great stuff going on independent circuits, but that doesn't get out to everybody always.
Well, for me, this list is hurt because I don't understand how A Few Good Men can't be on like this list. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's one of the top 2 best movies I've ever seen, and I think it's for everyone.
I love that. That movie is one. I love that movie. Anytime it's on, I gotta watch it. But for whatever, to me, it seems like it's more like a guilty pleasure. Like it's just not that great, but for some reason, I love it.
No,
it's not that it's bad. Just it doesn't. I would never be like, oh, that's a top 10 or top 15 or top 100 movie. But I do love that movie. I gotta watch it if it's on.
It's a top 2 movie, and for me, it is riddling. When I'm watching it, I don't want to look at my phone. I don't want to look away. I want to watch the scene every second of it and just focus on it. And the only movie that even compares, and I'm not sure which is better, is Inception. Inception didn't qualify for this list, but they said they'll do another one in 10 years. So that means 2016 or 2017, or maybe even 2018. Maybe they'll go back to that. Maybe
Dark Knight will be on it, so there's no way they're going to let Nolan get 2 on it.
Oh,
they're not going to let Nolan take 2 spots.
But Dark Knight will be on it. I agree with that. But Inception should be on it for sure. So that kind of hurts it to me. There's some interesting movies on it, but also as I read through it, there's just a lot of movies I've never even heard of besides from looking at this list over the last couple of weeks, kind of leading into this. And I'm not saying like I'm the end-all be-all, but I have a pretty good knowledge of movies from the 80s forward, and again, these are just so old. The average is 1961. I just really can't let that go.
To finish my thought from a minute ago is, you could say movies are getting worse now, but I think they clearly got better. People put out some decent stuff in the 40s, 50s, 60s, but when the 70s rolled around and you kind of got this what really came from France, and that type of thing, their style of filmmaking came into American movies in the 70s, starting with films like The Godfathers. They do a better job. They learn to move the camera differently. They learn to use music better. Performances got better. The writing got better. So I don't think that stuff's just really debatable. It's just fact. So to say that all these old movies are much better than these movies that came out in the 70s up to today it's just not factual, in my opinion. And I just said factual opinion, but you know what I mean.
All right, so are we ready to get into our What's Your Thoughts segment?
Yeah, and this week you're going to be asking me for my thoughts on something, so lay it on me.
Okay, I want to know your thoughts on if you have any ideas of a better way that you could go about compiling a top 100 movies of all time list.
I think it would be hard. Like I was saying, just you set the criteria, but unless you're going to nail down the criteria to like 400 movies like they did, it's going to be really hard because movies are people don't like certain genres and they're going to leave those out, and you're just going to have this huge list where maybe like 30 or 40 rise to the top, but after that it's just going to be like, where do you have the cutoff? Because you're going to have such a finite, small number. I mean, you may even get down to like the last 10, and you only have, even with 500 ballots, you may only have 25 or 30 people putting that movie on there if they can write in the whole list. There's just too many movies out there. There's too many movies that not everyone's seen. Even people who watch movies for a living. It'd be really hard. I mean, I agree with you. It does seem crazy that they only let you write in 5. But I can see why they did that, because otherwise it would have just been, you would have had the top 20 or 30 or 40, and then it would have just been crazy from there. And like the number 178th movie would have had 24 points, and the number 78 would have had 25. So I just don't know if there is a better way to do it without narrowing the list. I mean, maybe you do kind of like a round thing where you do one round and then you say, okay, we're going to take the top 400 or 500 from that and then do another round after that. Maybe that's a better way to do it. But I can see why they did it the way they did.
Would you feel obligated to watch all 400 movies that they put on their ballot if you were going to be voting on this?
I mean, maybe if it was my job and I got paid for it. If I didn't get paid for it, no. I don't. I mean, I'm assuming they asked like film critics, right?
Yeah, but, yeah.
But I mean, even in that first list in 98, I'm bet not all of them got paid or got paid well to be film critics.
Yeah, and I imagine it would have been super hard in 1998 to get your hands on a lot of these movies. I mean,
also true, yeah. Unless you have Turner Classic Movies, you can watch Intolerant on it.
Yeah, check your local cable and satellite providers.
Channel 69 for me. So, I watch movies on that sometimes, and again, I have the same problems. It's just the old movies. I think you should sit down and watch them, but there's never going to be my favorite because they're always going to kind of seem like work for the most part. It is what it is, I guess. But what about you? You got a better idea on that, or you go with my idea? Do 2 or 3 rounds and parse it down as you go.
Yeah, I haven't put a lot of thought into it, but that sounds like a better way. I'm not gonna say that's the best way. If I spend a couple years thinking about it, I probably could come up with a better way. But so we'll go with that.
Yeah, you've got like 3?
Yeah, that's true. And I'm sure like those people are like super old, so they wouldn't be really open to new ideas, anyways.
Maybe you can get Roger Ebert's spot. I know. I don't know about the other 3. Well, I know he loved The Godfather. Like I said, I know Citizen Kane is his favorite movie of all time. I'm almost positive his favorite movie of the 80s was Raging Bull. It was number 1, I think, at the end of the 80s. They did Siskel and Ebert did their top like 5 or 10 movies of the 80s, and that was number 1 for him. So we talked about him a couple weeks ago, and you and Steve talked about him recently. But he's a big fan of these. So, but his spot will be open up because I'm assuming he was on that list.
I imagine so, yeah.
Maybe you can get his spot.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do. I'll submit my podcast and see if they like it.
All right. Anything else?
If you like this show, you may like my show, 22MW. So you can subscribe through Pocketcast and iTunes and like us on Facebook at 22MW.
Definitely check out 22MW with Tony for sure, yes. And actually, a little bit of housekeeping. I said we would try to go over what we messed up from the week before, or the show before. The only thing I found out that was wrong, and no one sent me anything, but I realized it, was that Tony said Stan Lee wasn't in Iron Man 3. He was one of the beauty pageant judges. So Tony, you were wrong on that. I think I was right on everything. So
story of our lives.
The other thing was, it wasn't anyone was wrong, but the dark elf guy was Christopher Eccleston, who was one of the Doctor Who's. I knew he had played some other role before, and I couldn't think of his name, but that's who he was. We couldn't think of who that was. So that was our house cleaning from last time. Maybe we'll try to do that every week. Maybe we'll move that to the front of the show. It makes more sense. But that's all I got. Next time, we're going to be talking about the films of Kevin Smith and talking about Kevin Smith. So hopefully you'll come back and join us in 2 weeks. Again, subscribe on Pocketcast, iTunes, or whatever other podcast app you have. We should be on all of them. And you can email the show. Check the notes for the email address. Let us know what we did mess up, and we'll correct it on the next episode. So, thanks for listening. Hope you come back. And until then, see ya.